The button moved. All right. Hi, everybody. This is Zoph. You are watching Simply Scadian, no title required. I am going to turn it over to Lucas, my co-host, while I do geek girl stuff. Take it away, Lucas.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Simply Scadian, no title required. As always, our mission is to bring you, the good people of the known world, more good people of the known world. We again, we love our people who have really achieved high rank in the society. We congratulate those people, and they are a wealth of knowledge. But the reality of the situation is that we have just as many knowledgeable people, just as regular folks in the SCA, people who are just starting out, people who've been there for a while and they're content with where they are, or maybe they're people who are working towards their peerage, and just haven't gotten there yet. And hopefully we can get to them before that happens for them. As always, we rely on you as we are journeying through this. We need more people. Okay, I'm going to throw it. I'm going to throw my challenge at you first because nobody has met it yet, and I can't believe that. I want an overseas guest. Let's get somebody from the known world on the other side of the world. We go to Penzig, and those of you that journey there, and there are people from all over the map. And we want to reach out. The East Kingdom is wonderful. The Mid Realm is great. But and that happens to be our corners of the known. But we want to hit all corners of the known. We want you to know what's going on out there, the great work that the people of the SCA, the regular people of the SCA, are doing. So please hit up our Facebook page, fill out that survey. You know the people we should be talking to, or maybe you're the person we should be talking to. So just as always, our programming relies on your participation. So please get out there, help us out, and give us some good people. Speaking of good people and even better segues, all right. Today with us is Mel of Saint Brutus. They're 22 years old and based out of the College of Saint Brutus, located at Ohio State University. Currently, the only words they have are their AOA and Sable Gate, awarded to them in the Barony of Middle Marches. Currently a student at St. Brutus, as a student-facing president, de facto social media manager, and the founder, and this is something we're really going to get deep dive into today, founder of the SCA College Network, which is an intercollegiate group aimed at connecting collegiate Scadians and SCA groups all over the known world and providing them with community and resources. And just from the green room talk alone, this is going to be a good one, guys. Mel, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
So let's start out with the first question. How did you find the SCA?
So, how I found the SCA is actually really interesting because it's more or less the reason why I started the SCA College Network and why I'm so gung-ho about doing things for the group I'm currently involved with. So, I was at Ohio State Newark for my first year of college as a freshman, and there was no student organizations, at least that's not really an accurate statement. There weren't very many, so there wasn't very much for me to do. Obviously, when you're on a branch campus, your main goal is to leave and go to Maine, which is what I did in record time. And my sophomore year, I went to the fall involvement fair, and I went to the booth of some guys who I'd been talking to on a college group chat I was a part of. And I was kind of at the time under this delusion that I was going to be a HEMA fighter at some point. That never ended up happening, as we can get into later. But I went to their table and I saw these dudes fighting in medieval armor, and I'm like, that's cool. I want more of whatever that is. And I put my name on the list and I showed up to a practice. Now, I will say for like the first maybe year and a half I was involved with Brutus, I didn't really show up very much, mostly because being a college student, having rides to things is an issue, and I live off campus, so that was a kind of a big factor as to why I wasn't really involved my sophomore year very much. And then along with that, scheduling. But as I kind of got more and more involved with Brutus specifically, I would purposefully schedule my classes to be on campus, specifically on Mondays, but also every single day of the week. and I would schedule them to be rather late so I could go to practice immediately after. And the more and more I got involved with St. Brutus, on that little front, the more and more I began getting involved, I guess, with the SCA as a larger entity, especially during my junior and now senior years of college. I My very first event was RUM, which is the Royal University of Mid-Realm. It is a arts and science based event. And I went to that with a coworker of mine who I worked with at a living history museum, who was also a member of St. Brutus, come to find out. And my second event, which was the first one where I actually got to see armored combat fighting in like a real list, was Red Dragon. And from that point on, I've been very involved in the SCA, I guess in the more managerial ways, because I found out through a lot of, trial and error that combat wasn't for me. I have a condition called Ehlers-Danlos, so combat is actually physically painful, and it turns out it's not supposed to be like that. So I was unable to do heavy. Maybe some people with the condition can. I'm just not in a place where I can do it. And fencing didn't work out either. And I tried some scribal stuff, which I still do, and I can talk about it a little bit later if we'd like. But I really found my love for the SCA within administration because one, it's a thing everyone hates doing, I feel. Not a lot of people like, getting into the underside and the guts of an organization and making things run because we all like to go to events, we all like to do things, we just don't like to organize them, and I kind of get that. And also social media, which is a very vastly underrepresented portion of administration, and definitely something that if people hate being administrators, they hate running social media more. So that's really where I shined and where I guess we are left now.
Cool. Actually, I'm going to throw a question at you like right away from the chat. I hope I'm saying this right. David Talon. It said you've been involved with the college side of the SCA. How do you see things changing for you after you graduate?
So that's a very interesting question because I plan on going to grad school, so I'm not done throwing money at Ohio State just yet, but that's really a thing I think at Brutus specifically I've heard conversations about is like really what do we do after, we graduate? Because with college groups, they're revolving doors. A lot of the reason why people don't really like college groups, and I can kind of see it, is because we have extremely transient populations by design. People are only at universities for 4 years. Usually, universities don't like it when you have a bunch of non-university students going to a student organization. We've been able to balance things out fairly okay there, but generally across the board, they get really weird, especially when money's involved. And when it comes to, my place in the SCA started with the collegiate sector, and it's going to be very weird to see myself in a couple of years kind of being out of that sort of space because whether I like it or not, that's what's going to happen. That's aging for you. But I definitely will continue to do a lot of my social media managing stuff with the local barony because I know I'm already the deputy social media person for Middle Marches, which is the barony I live in. And I know that the SCA College Network, even if I'm an alumni, is probably going to still need my help in some respects, at least for the foreseeable future. There's no way to tell what's going to happen in the next 5, even 2 years, but I'm still going to continue doing administration because that's what I love best. It's obviously going to change a little bit, but I see nothing wrong with just adapting my strategy. And I'm trying to find people to already replace me now at Brutus since, eventually I'm going to get old and we don't want a succession crisis. So the train will go on, I suppose.
So how many colleges have SCA chapters?
So I do not know the answer to this question specifically because a lot of colleges, there are two portions to this question, I guess, to address. Number one is a lot of college groups that are adjacent to or part of the SCA technically are not official college groups because they're not registered with the kingdom or baronies at all. They operate as more of these little de facto sort of entities that go to SCA events and for all intents and purposes are college groups, but are just not officially recognized. And I would say for the SCA College Network, that's just kind of what a lot of them are because they have to be due to administrative issues. But also, a lot of college groups, which is also partially why I created the college network, go under very quickly and very unpredictably. Some of the reasons for why this is are kind of understandable. So, for example, succession crises, all your officers graduate. In order to keep the group going, you need more. And sometimes it's just a loss of interest because that can happen too. Sometimes, people don't want to carry it on, and that's fine. But it's very hard to track how many there are, mostly because I think before very recently there wasn't this cohesive entity really keeping them all together and keeping track. From the ones that I know are currently active, we have about 35, 36-ish that are a part of the college network now in some capacity that have members present within our ranks. In terms of how many college groups there are in total, I would say probably there's around 60 in existence, although whether or not some of them have gone under since the last time I've discovered they existed is yet to be seen. A lot of them do not have web presences, so it's very hard to see what they're actually doing, and I don't have a way to contact the people on campus. So for these smaller campuses, especially here within the US, it's very hard to see what exactly they're doing. And I know where the SCA was founded, I think UC Berkeley, their college group just went under very recently. St. David's, which is UC Santa Cruz, I believe, is getting revitalized, but the other one went under in 2021. So while they still can come back, it's a very transient number. And that's what the college network at its core is trying to fix a little bit, because obviously there's things out of our control that we can't do anything about because sometimes crap just happens. However, if we can help groups not go under, then that's a future I want to see. And especially so we can have a more concrete number of how many of us there are, how many of us can communicate with each other at a given time, and where there are groups and where recruitment efforts need to be increased.
So I mean, so just can you just take me through a little bit of like how you identify groups, what kind of aid you give them, how you connect them with these various groups, or
So the SCA College Network, I would say, started very much being a Discord server for all intents and purposes. That's primarily how we operate now. We plan on having these larger scale in-person events, but obviously we haven't even been around for a year, so planning something on a logistical level next to Penzic isn't going to be something we're going to be able to do. But the SCA College Network aims to connect students with each other, aims to connect college groups with each other. And the way I went about doing that for the first initial groups I contacted was that I went on Instagram and I would search college of, and I'd scroll through accounts and individually contact them, or I'd search for insert school name Renaissance Club or insert school name Medieval Society. And usually that's how I was able to locate a lot of them. Like, for example, did you know Brigham Young University technically has a group located at it? That is how I found it. They are part of our numbers, by the way. It was one of my most impressive feats contacting those people. But uh, a lot of my initial recruitment for the college network was just me reaching out to people on social media with St. Brutus's Instagram account, believe it or not. And as our numbers got bigger, eventually groups that were kind of near each other would invite each other to join. St. Vladimir, which is down in Arizona, St. Felix as well, were really great helps with that initial boost, kind of in getting people involved and getting the word out that we did exist. Because apparently, what I was told from a lot of people was that they kind of wanted something like this to be a thing, but no one ever reached out and initiated that process to start gathering people together. So I more or less just kind of picked up on the thought a lot of other people had. My idea was nowhere near original. And the type of resources we hope to provide is number one, access to peers. Obviously, because we've not been around for very long, we do not have very many at our disposal to answer questions or to help run things. However, if there are any watching this who would certainly like to be involved in helping answer a bunch of college kids' questions, please reach out to me and I will certainly help get you involved with that, or any of the SCA College Network social media accounts, because they are owned and operated by myself. I'll see it. We want to get these groups socializing with each other, primarily so that we have some intercollegiate activity going on. Ohio State, Ohio University, and Bowling Green State University, Falcons Erie, St. Brutus, and Darren-Held, respectively. I think I said those out of order from the other list I just said, but we're going to pretend like they were in order. Are all schools located in Ohio, and they're essentially in a big diagonal line from each other. So we were already kind of talking and wanting to facilitate plans with each other. Silva Volcani is also not too far from where we are. They're about 2 hours away from our friends in Darren-Held. And my goal with all that was, I think I might have confused them with another group because there's two kind of out that way. But either way, my goal was to try to get colleges that were within somewhat of a drivable distance to talk to each other. And even if they weren't in a drivable distance, just to have all of us kind of familiar with the fact the other exists. Because I also know from personal experience that when you run into administrative issues, especially as a college group, they're not necessarily things that can be remedied in the same way as a traditional SCA group's administrative issues would be. We are very different beasts than traditional SCA groups, and regardless if that's a good or a bad thing, it's something that needs to really be accepted. So putting other groups in contact with each other, particularly to ask for help whenever those issues arise, was another big goal of mine. And it's something that's actually happened a couple times. I have had to use my own creation to ask questions to people, and it's been extremely helpful. And I know University of Mary Washington just got a donation of gold key from University of Pennsylvania's group, and it's been really cool seeing all the other groups contact each other kind of independently of the things I was doing, which was really the goal of why I created it and what resources I hope to provide, is just that level of social networking and connectiveness. You know, we're going to each other's events now, we're talking to each other, we're collaborating with each other on programs or demos. And not only that, we're sharing resources, not only just with each other, but in theory, local peers from whatever kingdom, because I know there's many of those, can also help weigh in and help get us direct answers. Because sometimes I will say, for a college kid who can't always drive out to events, sometimes things like the college network is the most immediate way to have access to the larger SCA community when you can't always afford to pay gate for an event, which might sound rather ridiculous, but it adds up quite quickly, or have the means to travel to somewhere 2 hours away to meet someone to learn about a specific thing. So this is trying to centralize everything.
She's sneezing. God bless you. So I have a question. So just with your group, just like your specific campus group, what are the numbers like? How do you like, again, I think this is something because this is going to dovetail into like SCA stuff.
Mhm.
What are your numbers like? Because again, one of the complaints, not complaints, but one of the do betters we have consistently on the show is how do we bring new people in? So, many people are in your particular group? What kind of events are you doing, on that college level? And how are you keeping them like kind of interested in?
So that's a great question. So if any of my other fellow St. Brutus officers are watching, hi. And I will say we have about like maybe 15 to 20 people who are part of our ranks, and I say that as being a rather generous number because we have a lot of people come to our practices, especially when we do special themed ones. We've had somewhere in the wheelhouse of over 30 plus sign-ins one night just for Rapier alone. There was our Rapier night, that makes sense. But generally, at a practice, we have maybe around 10 as a steady number. And I know that sounds really small, but we've had good times and we have bad, and often our attendance is determined by two primary factors: what time it is in the school year, because exams and times a year where there's just more homework than others can certainly impact our attendance at practice, and also the proximity to the involvement fairs. So those are the student little club fairs that go on at a lot of universities, and usually we'll get a lot of people attending right afterwards, and then the number gradually drops off. And I know recruitment is, I don't want to say one of the immediate issues we face because that makes it sound like it's a lot worse than it actually is. But recruitment's an issue that I think all college groups, especially ones like ours, face because we have an extremely transient population. Ohio State, we happen to be an advantage there because Ohio State is one of the largest universities in the country with over 66,000 students, most of which are on main campus. So we have an advantage in the fact that every year we get a brand new crop of freshmen to, pitch the dream to. We have people who see our posters up in the hallway because I tape them there. And through just recency effect, will come to a meeting randomly. Sometimes I'll bring my friends to meetings and they'll bring their friends. Whether or not they come back frequently is a different story, but it happens. And I know with recruitment, a really big thing is keeping people engaged, particularly college kids, because we are a demographic with notoriously little time and money, but a lot of enthusiasm. College kids, especially when they're freshmen, want to be a part of something. They're looking for their community. They're looking for where they belong and where they feel wanted. And that's usually why we get a lot of people at the club, around the club fairs, because they want to try us out. And a lot of times I know a lot of groups don't always necessarily make people feel that way. This isn't a negative thing. It's just more of you either click or you don't, or it's just a matter of being more open to newcomers, which is, I think, something we can all improve at. It's not just a problem with our group or with any other one. But I would say the social media efforts have really helped getting people to come and to stay because promotion and keeping the thought of us in people's heads is definitely something that is very helpful for our cause. And it's also given us really cool opportunities because the right people see those posts and are like, ooh, cool, we should invite them to this event, which actually happened fairly recently. Ohio State invited us to do a armored combat demonstration at the showing of Gladiator 2 that they were doing in the student union. And through that, we got several people wanting to join St. Brutus just from that alone. A couple of them have come to practice. They seem fairly with it. And just really keeping up, like posting, keeping up relevant things, or to prep for the Gladiator 2 showing. We showed Gladiator 1 and had pizza. Having those fun things like that, or an end of the year tournament, giving students things to look forward to, always giving them new opportunities, things to kind of look for, are really what not only college groups should be doing within their means, of course, but what I think a lot of groups should be doing. Because I think it's really easy to get stuck in this mindset of constantly having to improve and get better at the things that you're doing. Like constantly just locking in and only doing that thing for the entirety of practice and then leaving and then rinse and repeat. And that can work for some people. I'm not saying it's not a good thing to do, but definitely things like little mixer events, showing a movie, having those periodic moments where things are just kind of slowed down and it's more focused on community building or just having people there to do a fun, neutral activity that doesn't involve hitting someone with a stick or paint can definitely be like a palate cleanser when you've had these large chunks of time where all people are doing is just these specific and sometimes kind of siloed activities.
So what does a typical meeting look like for St. Brutus?
I will say for all college groups, we're all structured slightly differently, usually depending on our needs. So St. Brutus, we happen to have a hybrid practice structure. So we have arts and sciences, fencing, and armored all going on at the same time, usually in the same room. We're fortunate enough to have a larger space where doing that isn't necessarily a problem unless we have a particular increase of people, and even then we have the outside parking lot, which we have used before. It's not it's not impossible. And usually we will be working on our own activities. We try to get people to go around and see what others are doing because it's nice to be recognized by someone who's not actively doing your thing and being told, "Ooh, that's cool. That's a cool thing you're doing." And for the last starting around the last 30 minutes of our meeting, we do something called an after action. That's something I can directly credit to our Marshal Cottis for bringing to the group because it's very important to him, and I believe Duke Kellick was the one who started that at other practices, which is where the idea came from. But we essentially have everyone go around in a circle and say something they were working on, and then we have them go around again and say something cool that they saw someone else who was not them working on. And usually that's a really good way to have some interdisciplinary recognition for the things that people are doing, because certainly, again, when you're painting something and everyone else is fighting, you don't want to hear just only about how good everyone was fighting. Sometimes you want to hear about how good your painting was, or sometimes you want to congratulate the fighter for doing a cool thing that you noticed. And usually that's how our meetings are. Sometimes we'll have things called theme nights, which usually happen on average about once a month. I know this semester it's been a little bit wonky because we've had a lot of really interesting opportunities pop up, but those theme nights usually are to celebrate one specific discipline of the SCA. Our most common one was fencing, and that was started by Sigmund Grimborg, who is now back in Brendoken. He is retired as our fencing marshal, which is we rather a shame because I miss him greatly, but you know what? Bigger and better things.
I just met him last weekend.
He's absolutely delightful.
Yes, he was very
And our
nice.
new fencing marshal, Maximilian Fastnacht, is certainly delightful as well. I'm happy that he is the one who has taken over for Grimm because there's certainly large shoes to fill there. But we'll have theme nights, and the fencing nights in particular were started by Grimm as an effort to get more fencing representation at Brutus, because before he began doing that, it was extremely few and far between. And now I would say there's more fencers at Brutus than there are armored, you know, subjectively. But sometimes like we'll have those on average about once a month because it kind of forces some of our usual armored suspects to try something new. And I think it's really cool to see people of interdisciplines try each other's things out. We've been toying with the idea of having A&S nights where we work on things like repairing gear, making garb, things like that. And also, of course, ordering pizza and making it into like a fun little affair. That was something our previous president, Xavier, had proposed, and our current seneschal, because Brutus has a dualistic structure, so there's both a seneschal and a president. Baldwin has wanted to definitely carry on and have implemented at some point this semester. I know it's probably going to be more towards the end of the year, but that's usually how our practices go for the most part. They're mixed in terms of activities because we like to try to offer as much as possible. I think a lot of SCA groups should offer as much as possible, especially if they do have high student populations or want to bring in student populations, because a lot of us treat activities like we treat free samples at the grocery store. We like to try a little bit of everything before we fully commit to something. And having all of these activities going on at once for people to see, interact with, ask questions about is certainly a good way to help people find their niche. Because I know I didn't think I'd ever like painting because I hated painting before, but now that I've done some scribal work myself, I'm now in a place where this is something I can do on my own and that I enjoy, and now other people are picking up as a result. Or my one friend Luke, who I had to convince to come to a Brutus meeting, but who's now a mainstay member. He started out doing armored combat, but then he just tried out fencing one day and absolutely loved it. So giving people the opportunity to try new things is really, I think, paramount here. And having those periodic little breaks with theme days or like fun little mixer activities like watching Gladiator 1 and complaining about how historically inaccurate it is, it was really a great bonding moment for the group. And those are the moments I like the most because they make me feel like I'm part of a big old family. And honestly, when you're a college student like me and the world sucks, sometimes feeling like you're part of something can make it suck a little less.
Mhm.
So kind of on that vein then, is there anything like wish list wise that you wish, and this is kind of like a message we can send to a lot of the the baronies and groups that have colleges in their area. Is there anything you wish that the SCA proper was doing for you guys or with you guys as far as support is concerned? Like, we love it if this or, whatnot, maybe give some ideas to the local SCA groups that also have college groups in their area.
I will say for the collegiate sector, as I think I mentioned a little bit before, is very different from how a lot of normal practices work, whether they be on the baronial kingdom, shire level. they're vastly different be animals, primarily because they are focused around a transient population. There are a lot of things that we need within our local groups, not just talking about Brutus specifically, but talking about the entire SCA that we don't necessarily get because we just are simply too different. I don't want to say that is it's a bad thing. It's just these aren't things that are often thought about because they just kind of come with other SCA groups. Like for example, you're very lucky to have peers around a college group, especially a non-official one. So like some of these more de facto organizations, people to ask about armored combat, people to ask about crafts or things like that. We're lucky enough to have one of the youngest peers in the known world, to my knowledge, Valia, and she has been an absolute wonderful help at not only just answering people's questions and doing little demonstrations of her embroidery, but just being a great support for Brutus. And I know other peers in our area, such as Zara, Ginny, and Alf as well. I believe they have a couple peerages as well between them. Our Baroness even that they have been really helpful for supporting us, but I know that support on a wider scale can be fairly inconsistent, especially because there is this persistent belief that because we are transient populations, we are not worth the time investing resources and time into, which to be fair, I understand from some perspective because you don't want to be throwing in money, time, gear into people who are just going to disappear in 4 years, right? But they don't disappear. If you get them invested in the SCA, while they might move away from the college group they started at, wherever they move to, they're going to try to seek out the group that is located there. And that's the case for one of our members who's going to be graduating the semester and moving to Madison. We already have him hooked up with his local group that will be within his area. For people who want to be in the SCA and who have been shown that this is something worth spending time in during their undergrad or grad school years, this is something they will invest time in continuously. And having people who are willing to step up from the larger community, who are willing to help donate gear, donate gold key, help drive people to events, which I know isn't always something you should necessarily advertise, but I will say is a group of people who don't have a car, who usually don't have cars, who usually have trouble getting places transportation wise. These are all things that really help us and especially people who want to come not just use our groups as like let's say little personal fiefdoms for themselves, but use our groups as avenues to expand the SCA through teaching, through really getting involved with our community and supporting it. It can mean a world of difference to have someone coming around the group and being helpful. Granted, I don't want to encourage a bunch of local people to just show up to a random college group one day, because I will say it is kind of scary when just a random 40-year-old man shows up to a college campus and is asking, is this the college group? And then just start doing his own thing at it. Because I think that can sometimes also happen because I think due to like where some college groups are, it's just a more convenient, I guess, drive for some people. But providing resources, being more willing to provide resources, and being more willing to be teachers to us, this is a long-term investment. College groups are a long-term investment because while, yeah, the group of people you might have are going to change every 4 years, you're still going to have people that when they come out of the other side of that college group, like for example, myself, I'm in my senior year and I'm going to grad school, but eventually I have to like give up my seat, right? Or like some of my friends who are graduating at this point, you're going to have those people who are going to continue to stay in the SCA even after their college time ends. Many of the people who are, in St. Brutus as the SCA facing officers are graduates of Ohio State University and first interacted with the SCA as members of St. Brutus as freshmen, sophomores, seeing us at the involvement fair and thinking it was cool. And having people who are willing to donate their time, extra equipment, and expertise, especially when it comes to answering questions and making themselves more available on other platforms, it's really valuable. And I guess that's where I should segue into my other point, is that the SCA as a whole, if it wants to appeal to the collegiate demographic, needs to really expand itself digitally. This is a soapbox I have got on multiple times, and I understand as a volunteer organization that we have limits. There are only so many things we can do, and there's only so much manpower to do them. However, advertising events, putting those advertisements not only on Facebook, but on things like Instagram, having a website, making TikToks, frequently engaging with social media allows people like me to see it. Because there's a lot of people too who discover things like HEMA, Boohurt, or in some cases our community through the For You page, through their suggested content on their Instagram feed, because that's the platform they use, and whose only real avenue for finding some of this information are through these more public facing platforms. Because I will say Facebook has a lot of flaws, and one of its flaws is that it's something I would classify as more of an internal platform. In this day and age, how Facebook is used, particularly within the SCA, is very, very insular. And when it comes to finding information about an event, finding information about a practice, people my age don't necessarily want to have to create a Facebook account if they don't already have one for whatever reason, join a private group, answer a bunch of questions just to find out when the practice time is. They want to be able to see things. They want to be able to look through it themselves and decide whether or not, this is something they want to invest time in. And when it comes to events, I shouldn't have to be panjading through like several different submenus through a web page that last looks like it was updated in 2004 in order to find vital information, because the SCA has an information dissemination issue, which is a general problem in a lot of respects. It's not something necessarily exclusive to the collegiate world, nor is it something that's necessarily only harmful to it. It's a SCA-wide problem, and the spottiness in the way that we do disseminate information about important things like court lists, administrative changes, when things are due, or even just promoting events in general, is I think part of the reason why we're having this recruitment problem, particularly with people who are my age between 18, 25 or whatever. Because we're not going on the places that they can see. We're not going into the spaces that they readily use. We're staying in this one little insular bubble and not going out of it. And for the SCA and people already within it, I guess that works. Because if you are already in the right Facebook groups, if you're friended with the right people, you already know the information anyway, more or less. But when it comes to people like me, who have to find out about social media changes, sometimes through someone messaging me about it privately, being like, hey, did you hear about this? Or sometimes when event promotions are only limited to a Facebook event, don't have a website, and I want my friend to come, but she doesn't have a Facebook account, so I have to relay the information manually, and half the time I can't find everything I need to know anyway. That's really frustrating for people who want to be involved in things like this, but don't necessarily know how because they aren't already connected with a college group, or because they just don't really know how our community works. Because I know that was a big thing for me, and a thing I still feel in some ways is that I'm not really sure how the SCA in a lot of respects functions. There's things I'm learning every day, and even as an officer on the baronial level, as an officer on my group level, and starting an intercollegiate group that now encompasses individuals across the US, Canada, Europe, and Australia, there's still things that I have to learn, right? Because we're always learning, we're always getting better. But making information accessible is definitely a huge thing that I would like to see pushed for, not only just by the people within the mid-realm, which is my kingdom where I'm from, but by crowns all across the known world, because it really will be the key to our long-term success, is opening the SCA, making things more accessible, and moving away from this centralization just exclusively on Facebook.
Now that's like pretty close to like the last question that we asked, which we kind of teased you about. So I definitely want to come back to that, but I do want to hit up the chat because I do want to respect the chat because I love it when people are hitting up there.
Hello, chat.
I feel like somebody's calling you out, so I want to see your reaction to this.
I will say I do misspeak sometimes, so I will apologize
No, no,
in
no,
the
no,
event
no.
of
This
me
is in a good way.
misspeaking.
This is, I'm sure. Somebody has asked me to ask you about their Book of Brutus.
Oh my Lord. Okay, so I do not have it sitting next to me, so I cannot really hold it up or anything, but the Saint Brutus Book of Excellence was a project I'd started right after the local event Mugmort Melees. I believe my inspiration for it was either Duke Kellick or someone else. I'm not really sure. They received an award with the names of all the previous recipients inscribed into the regalia. And I got kind of butthurt because one of the things that I kind of get annoyed at about college groups, and this is just my own personal pet peeve, I'm not sure how systemic this is that we don't have very great ways of keeping track of who was part of our group, what they did while they were here, and the accomplishments they've made at being part of a collegiate group. Because I feel like, again, like I said earlier, there's this weird belief that our groups are a waste of time, or that they're not really all that important. But when you look at like an actual list of all the awards people win while they're part of a college group, that says a very different story. I didn't have that, and I got really annoyed by that fact. So one day, I just randomly decided for my first ever Scribble project, I had not done any sort of thing before this, to essentially create a book full of Brudi who have won an award. And the criteria was that it had to be since our organization was established, so I'm not backdating things pre-2017, and it has to be while they're a part of our organization. We have about At the time, I was looking to make about 20 pages, and there are pictures of it on the Saint Brutus Facebook group. I can point people there if you'd like to see the finished pages. But all of them feature a painting of the person, whether it be in garb or armor, their coat of arms, along with a list of the awards that they had won, followed by date and the event that they were awarded them at. I started that project. Oh, it's being brought to me. Well, look at that. That's convenient. Thank you, lovely assistant. So I can kind of show. Can we see it? So
Yep.
I had help from the wonderful Steve of Tiernawood because I'm a fairly illiterate person. I did. This was the very first page I actually made. It's the cover. There's a couple little Easter eggs hidden within the border. So if any of you are familiar with St. Brutus, you can kind of pick out what some things are. The hurdy-gurdy is my personal favorite because it's not like I play the instrument or anything. But these are the pages on average. Okay, I need to find a way to get this better in the camera. They took about 7 hours on average to complete per one, and I would go through about one pan of gold paint for every four of these I would do, so that got very expensive very quickly. But all of these are to keep track of the things people in our group has done, because not only is this a really cool way of record keeping, and we already have some students saying that they're going to do more in the SCA just so they can end up in this, but also it's a way of celebrating just everything collegiate groups as a whole represent. Because all of these people, regardless of if they're still with us or not, like these two lovely individuals have moved on to bigger and better things job-wise. But all of these people have done really cool things. And it's really cool to celebrate that because they did it while a part of our little corner of the world. And this is living proof that groups like ours are worth your time and investment. These people right here are our bread and butter. These are the future of the SCA. These are going to be our future peers. In fact, one of them is already a peer. Shout out to Valia. She's absolutely great. I like how my phone buzzes. I'm very sorry about that. But these are our future peers, our future artisans, knights, masters of defense. It's our legacy right there. And I want to look back. I want people to look back on Brutus and be able to say, oh yeah, I saw that guy sitting on the throne, or oh yeah, I saw that guy in an event. He's so cool. He was part of our organization. And I want to celebrate that. And I really wish other groups would do the same because I know that was resource intensive because I was the one who made it. So I know how much time and effort went into it, just like I can say I know how much time and effort went into social media promotion because I was the person who did that. I know how much time and effort went into the administrative structure because just a couple weeks ago, I saved Brutus from getting completely axed by OSU's administration. I got us our funding back. A lot of the best things in life, not just in the SCA, are things that are extremely painful and at some points redundant to do. Seem tedious, they take a lot of time, and at a certain point halfway through, you wonder why you did in the first place. But when you're done and you see people's faces when you show them the final product, you are quickly reminded why you did bother to break your back doing all those things. I have about 6 pages that are unpainted currently sitting on my desk. Unfortunately, paper season has slowed their production, so I'm very sorry to all the people who know they have pages currently in the works. I promise I'll get them done eventually. But the point of that book, really, and the point of, I guess, really me coming on to here and talking to you all, is to really preach the merit of groups and people like us. Without people like Xavier, without people like Baldwin, without people like Steve, without people like Constance, Maximilian, Valya, Codis, Sigmund Grimborg, we're saying the full name, without people like Lee, Nicholas, we wouldn't have the great things we do because all of our contributions collectively as a group make up really what the SCA is. It makes up all the special things. And those are the things I really want to celebrate.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, again, that is the coolest thing. Like, what do you want to do here, Zog? You want to keep asking questions? You want to?
Yeah, we could do one more. So,
It's a weird time. So,
yeah,
uh,
so my
I could go on
question,
forever.
we can't. Sadly, 5 a.m.
yeah,
comes mighty early.
yeah.
So, how do we keep these students in the SCA? You mentioned a student who's moving to Madison and you help them find the group. Is that something that more collegiate groups should be doing? Helping them connect to the SCA wherever they're going to move, or does it fall on the student themselves to do that?
I think it's a very multifaceted question because, in terms of what the SCA as a whole, including collegiate groups, I'm going to lump them into that as well, could be doing to keep students engaged is really it comes down to investing in the students you have, investing in their interests, and investing to making sure they have a good time. Because while I understand that, again, there's going to be people who you get the involvement fair just never show up again. Like, that's just going to be a thing that happens. It's not something you can mitigate. But there are forms of, member loss that we can. And part of that comes into just really investing in those people, caring about them, taking interest in what they're doing, their personal lives, checking up on them every once in a while, because I've been put in some very scary situations within the last year regarding some students. And I was very scared for them at a certain point, but because of things like Saint Brutus, they were able to come out on the other side and are all the stronger for it. Because again, having organizations like Saint Brutus really isn't, I don't think, the most important thing in the world. They're not more important than your grades. They're not more important than being able to pay your rent, but they are a place that can provide peace of mind, solace, and community when you feel like the world inherently wants to rip you apart and then stomp on your shreds. And having people who are willing to sit down and listen to a student talk about, medieval astronomy for 45 minutes because they just really like that, or having someone willing to teach people how to fight heavy from the ground up, or things like that nature. Having people willing to drive people to events, introduce them to members of the wider community, and to an extent, yeah, get them hooked up with the groups where they're going to be going when they graduate. Having people willing to set aside the time to not only be good leaders, good seneschals, good exchequers, good presidents, good treasurers, but good friends. Because ultimately, I think that's what a lot of us want. They're hard to come by, especially, in this day and age where it seems like everything is ruled so heavily by cruelty. Sometimes you just want to go to a place where, you feel appreciated and wanted. And creating those safe spaces is how you're going to get people to stay. Investing in those people, indulging those interests, being willing to play teacher is how you're going to get that. And stepping up, providing people with the resources, like, for example, the group location and contact information for when, someone's going to be moving away. That's really a big way of doing it because as I said, there's going to be instances where people are just not going to come back and that's just going to happen. You can't really necessarily work around everything. Trust me, I've tried. And you're not always going to be able to get the outcome you want because sometimes it just doesn't happen. Same reason why college groups will occasionally collapse. We don't know how or why, it just simply does. But the thing that makes the SCA College Network, things that make little entities like St. Brutus, or even what makes the SCA as a whole so important, I think, is those little meaningful connections you make along the way. It's not just getting peerages, it's not getting awards, although I will say peerages and awards are super nice. It's not just taking part in the activities that we all know and love. It's making friends and feeling like you're a part of something much greater than yourself and being able to look forward to whatever that thing is, whether it be an event over the weekend or picking up that project that you've been kind of wanting to start but didn't fully know how. And as a community, I think we can, in a lot of respects, do much better at making students like me feel welcome because I know a lot of us started at my age in college. And I think some people have forgotten what it's like to not know what the word peerage means or to not know what order of precedence means. It sounds like order of operations, and I don't like math. Math scares me. That's why I'm a humanities major. It's really easy just to kind of get lost in the grand scape of, a culture the SCA itself is on its own. It takes a lot to step back and to see things from just the point of view of a 18-year-old freshman girl who kind of likes Game of Thrones.
Right. All right. Time for the last question. Lucas?
What, and I think we've touched on it a little bit, but what can we as a society do better?
Well, there's a lot of things I could say to answer this question. I'm pretty sure many members of the college network who are watching this, whether it be after the broadcast or live, might be screaming the answer to that at their screens right now. But not only do I call upon the SCA to support its collegiate members and collegiate groups, we have people who aren't part of collegiate groups that still matter, but I also call on them to make efforts to make themselves more accessible. Move away from Facebook. You do not have to abandon it. We do not need to stop using it. It has a place. Make more efforts to really reach out to your local communities and to advertise yourselves because we do a cool thing that is inherently cool all on its own. I took that book that I showed you all to class, and I have been able to get people to follow our Instagram or to engage with us more often just by showing them that book offhandedly before I went to a meeting. Or people would see our videos, randomly pop up on their feeds, and they're like, oh my God, that's so cool. And then eventually they show up to a practice. That can happen on the local level too. All of these really cool things that St. Brutus and not just St. Brutus, but groups all over the collegiate sector are experiencing can happen on a shire-wide, kingdom-wide, whatever level. We just need to let it. We need to expand. We need to branch out a little bit more. I know it's uncomfortable and I know it takes work. I'm willing to help people and answer questions where need be because social media is my bread and butter. That's how I managed to get Ohio State to not only collaborate with us, but to promote that collaboration so people actually showed up. We have the ability to do so much, we just simply don't do it. And I understand that a lot of things are hard. But again, as I said, the best things in life are the ones that make you mildly annoyed and make you kind of want to quit halfway through. I think we reach that point within our activities we practice. We've reached that point maybe in our own professional careers. From the administrative side, I think it's time we reach that point with promoting ourselves using social media and really expanding a lot, out there because HEMA's doing it. Boohert's doing it. More of my friends think we're a HEMA group than anything else, and I've had to repeatedly explain, no, that's not what we do. We're not the guys who hit each other with folding chairs. We're not Boohert. Stop. But because they have taken that, step, it's something people know of. And it's something that some random dude from the business school who probably doesn't engage with history in any other meaningful way knows. We have the opportunity to move in that step, and especially with figures like Chapel Roan making medieval core more popular. You know, this medieval aesthetic is becoming very popular on social media. This is a free opportunity being handed to us. All we need to do is take it.
Great. All right.
Mel, thank you so much. I mean, I think you've given us a lot to think about. I'm hoping that the people who watch the show really do take that message to heart and that we do move forward. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
I hope I was somewhat coherent today. Thank you for having me.
Wonderful.
All right, you've been watching Simply Scadian, no title required, with our special guest, Mel of Saint Brutus. We will be back in 2 weeks. See everybody then.